get all kinds of subscribers and become a YouTube celebrity with my stream cutting out. Man, okay, sorry for you guys who might have missed out something on the stream. What I would suggest, we haven't done really anything. This is up to now, it's been mostly all review from the last lab. So if you are just coming in on the stream now, you might want to check out the stream from the last lab because that has everything that we've covered. We're pretty much through our review of what we did last session. So the point I was making here is that this little word right here is why we can't just say class equals make it red, because that's going to confuse things, because this is already a reserved word in JavaScript. Class is valid in HTML, but in JavaScript it's a bit of an issue. So what they did instead was give us class name. That's why we do it. So now that we have kind of covered that stuff, and we're talking a little bit about CSS, let's talk a little about the tragic history of CSS. I don't know about you guys. I find CSS pretty frustrating at times. Oh. I have issues with it. Part of the reason I think I have those issues is because I got very used to working in Flash at one point. And as a visual environment, Flash was extremely robust. And we didn't have any CSS. If we wanted something red, we just made it red. If we wanted to position something, we pulled it where we wanted it, and it was positioned. You know, the entire environment was like very, very visual. This is compounded with the fact that CSS didn't really, wasn't a thing when I came through Seneca as a student. It was all like tables and things like that. So, you know, I heard about it. I was like, that's stupid. I would start doing Flash. And then it took me a while before I, was in a position where I needed to learn about CSS. And when I started getting into it, I'm like, why'd they do it this way? Why'd they do it that way? This is still stupid. I can't believe it's still stupid. And I'm bad-mouthing CSS a little bit here. I don't mean to offend anybody who's a fan of CSS, because you can do great things with it. There's no doubt about that. But the way that you do it, to me, feels very obtuse. And if you've worked in any other visual environments, you guys did some After Effects, right? Maybe some 3D Studio Max and so forth. Did you ever use margin? No. Did you ever use padding in any of those things? No. Right? You have a coordinate system. You have X, Y, sometimes Z coordinates. And most visual environments, that's how it's done. But CSS isn't like that because it was intended to be like a templating system for pages that were based on the print world. That's why all the language in CSS is print-based. Did you do InDesign? Yes. You could have done some margin there. Yeah. Padding, things like that, right? It's like the print world, that works. The typography rules in the print world, great. But the problem is that we're not in a print world anymore, are we? The web has evolved. We're using it for things it was never intended for originally. That's why they had to rewrite JavaScript to make the ES6 JavaScript. In the next lab, lab 3, I'm going to show you some ES6 specific features of the language that work really nicely with React that will save you a lot of work. So it's great that that kind of advancement's being made in JavaScript, but what's happened on the CSS side of things? We did get CSS 3, and it added a lot of nice filters. It added a lot of new visual properties and so forth. But in terms of the way things are done, no real change. Selectors still work the same. We did get a couple more pseudo selectors, which was pretty cool, but in reality, it still didn't really meet the need that we have today. It's not powerful enough. So what's happened over time is this. In the very beginning of styling, There were no CSS sheets, right? No external style sheets. Everything was an inline style. So you'd say style equals right in your page, and then you'd put your styles that you want inside of there. But when you're producing all kinds of pages with similar layout and similar style, they thought it would be simpler and better to have some kind of a templating system. And so the CSS sheet was born. Now, as things have continued on, in more modern times, we actually see people reverting back to the inline style. I never thought this would happen. But what they've realized is that CSS has the same problem that the DOM does. In yesterday's class, I talked about a global variable. Do you remember that? And I was like, oh, here's my marker. I'm trying to remember it's here. And then when I look away, one of you guys goes and moves it, and I'm screwed. That's the DOM in a nutshell, right? CSS is the same. It has the same problem. Every piece of code in your entire application has access to the CSS sheet, which means that this piece over here changes something, and then this piece over here doesn't know what happened, and your whole thing breaks. So much of the systems that have developed over time have been to try and deal with this problem, this complexity. You guys know about CSS preprocessors? Yeah, less and Sass and so forth. You could actually write them in CodePen here. You'll notice there's a gear on the CSS as well. You can turn on a CSS preprocessor. It works a little bit the same as Babel, where it takes the code that you're writing and then turns it into regular old CSS. So using tools like that, they basically rewrote CSS. They said it doesn't really work the way we would like it to. We want to have things like variables. We want to have what they call a mix-in. We want to be able to nest selectors and a bunch of features like this. And so they sort of created this hack to get around the problems of CSS because it had not been revised in so long. But now you're adding an extra step. You've got this compiling step that you've got to do. And you're doing all this workaround to try and provide a way of managing the complexity of the CSS, when really the answer is get rid of the complexity. You know what I mean? The answer isn't to like slap bandages on the bullet holes. The answer is to like stop the bullets kind of thing. So I'm super, super happy that in the last couple of months, this new library came out, and it's automatically becoming quite popular. It's called Styled Components. And the two guys that made it, long time JavaScript guys, they basically looked at what React was doing with the virtual DOM. They saw how it fixed this problem by eliminating direct access to the DOM. And they said, well, why don't we make like a virtual style sheet? And so they've basically, by adding a tool onto React, solved the same problem on the CSS side that React solves on the DOM. I hope that kind of makes sense, right? Like, you know what? We're probably going to just have to write some code in order to see how all of this works. I'm also really happy to say that even though it's quite powerful, it does simplify things enormously. Now, you're still going to be using your regular CSS skills. You'll still need to know the CSS properties and what they do, so all that stuff you've learned isn't going away. But just the way that we apply it is changing a bit, because with this library, number one, similar to how we moved our HTML over into the JavaScript with JSX, we're going to use something called a tagged string literal to do the same thing for your CSS. So there will not be any CSS sheet anymore. Now, that means everything's in JavaScript. The only thing that's not in JavaScript is this little div. You know what I mean? That's it. The rest is all going straight on into the JS. Now, I actually like this. It may take a little bit of getting used to, but I think you're going to like it as well, because it's actually really distracting flipping back and forth between these pieces. I've never really worked in a development environment that was like that before. It's kind of a strange thing. Usually, everything's together in one spot. Well, now we're achieving that. So shall we dive on in and do some stuff? And if you had a chance to, look ahead a little bit to today's lab, we've got tons of awesome examples for you listed out in the resources there. All kinds of cool styles and layouts and things like that. I went with a Transformers theme because I saw a clip about Bumblebee and I was like, that is dope. And then I found a palette that I really liked and it was yellow and I was like, Bumblebee. So I sort of went along that too. Devin has been thinking more about tracking analytics on social media and things like that. So she sort of mocked up this interface for an application called Socialite. And it's, something she imagined would let you track how popular you are on social medias. So those are all listed out in your resources there, and I encourage you to take a look at them. But it'll be helpful for you if we kind of dive on in and do a couple of examples here. And I'll show you about 3 or 4 different features of this library that are very nice to use. So let's get down to business here. We've got a new script tag. So let's get started here. Head back up to where our script tags are. And we've got a new library here. So give yourself a script tag with a source. Now thankfully this whole thing is inside of one script tag. It's not a super huge piece of code, which is nice. So you're going to go HTTPS. Now you can copy this if you wish. This one is also in cdnjs.cloudflare.com, Ajax, libs, styled components, and the latest version is 2.0.0. So even though it's very new, they are already at 2 full versions here. So it's pretty stable. I haven't noticed any problems with it. There we go. I think I got that right. Now just so you guys know, I'll remind you, if you ever wonder if one of your things is not loading, in your developer tools, if you hit the old F12 there, we usually use the console here, but there's one also called network, and this will show you in red anything that failed to load. So anytime that I've put in a new script tag or style sheet or something, I usually do take a quick look on here just to make sure that, something isn't failing to load. Worth knowing about. As you can see, it also shows you how long it takes for things to load. So if something is really slowing down your site, this is a good place to find it. Okay, let me close that out. I'm going to do one more while I'm here. I want to bring in a set of fonts here. So I'm going to do a link with an href, and I'm going to get some icon font. Boop, boop, boop. So it's going to be in fonts.googleapis.com, icon, family equals material. Now material design is something you're going to hear me mentioning quite a bit. And the examples we've made are all based on Google's material design. I'm sure you've heard me talk about it before. Okay, great. Guys, good with that? So we added one more script tag and one link to an icon font. Beautiful. Link, yep. Extra points to whoever was singing Madonna right then, by the way. I don't know who that was, but
that was me.
That was impressive. Okay, believe it or not, that is really all we need to get started with this new library that we want to use. Okay, let's see if we can make a small little demo up here. So go right to the top of your JavaScript. We'll say equals so this is us reaching into that new code that got loaded from this new script tag we put in and saying, you know, give us the default function inside of there. This is all we need to turn on the styled components library. It's functional right now. Update things a little bit here. We'll make a very small, the smallest little demo I can think of for using styled. So follow along with me here. We'll make maybe just a little, you know what? We've been using H1s. Let's do an H1. We'll say const, I'll call it styled H. This one here, you can call it whatever you like. Yeah, this one is a variable right here. Now, technically, this one up here, styled, you could call it whatever you want because it's just a variable. But I'd recommend using styled like this because in the help documents, this is how they've done it everywhere. So if you also call yours styled, it will be helpful when you look in the help documentation. So here we go. Let's say equals styled dot h1. And then here's the only tricky part of it, guys. I think I showed you a long time ago about string literals. To make one, you need to use the character whose name I forget. But at the very top left of your keyboard, do you see a key that looks like a wiggly worm with a little piece of crud under it, right? So click on the crud like this. What is it? What'd you call it? Nobody knows. It's it looks like a quote, but don't be fooled. It's not a quote. It's the little. It's Tildy's unknown friend, you know, like. Is that what it's called?
We call it
Two. I like that. Okay.
But it's
So,
like this.
yeah, I call it wiggly worm.
Okay.
Don't know. I like yours better.
In Portuguese, we call it tio.
Tio. Okay. So not tio, but the same key as that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you get it?
It's some weird stuff.
Okay. So now check this out. This is where it gets really cool. Hit the enter. Give yourself a little room in here. And now, just the same way as we were writing HTML over here as JSX, you can put your styles in here.
The same.
You just write CSS styles, whatever you want. Yep. So let me put a color red, or no, maybe I'll say color blue, just so I can tell the difference. Like this.
Does it override whichever style we have on CSS if we write it on JavaScript? Say we have some styling on CSS, but we want to make some.
Yeah, you can copy and paste it.
But does it override what it's?
Oh, I see what you mean. Probably not. I think your style sheet would override this. Yeah, I think. Not positive. Now, you can use both. There's no reason you can't use a style sheet along with this. Yeah, which actually I'm going to do today, so we'll see some examples on that. Okay, so maybe I want to use this now. So let me go to my little tester that I've got here, and I'll change it a little bit. Let me get rid of that. So let me see if I can try this out. I'm going to say, hey, use my brand spanking new styled header to say, hi, Ma. Boom.
But how does he know that this is an H1?
Because we said, give us a styled H1.
I know, but we didn't write H1 down there.
That's right. We've created our own styled element.
Okay, so that makes it become an H1.
Yeah.
So what we did, we created this const.
Yeah. Do you know what this winds up being? This winds up being a React component with the styles applied to it, which we can now use anywhere we like.
And then what's the style after the equal mark?
After this?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, this is this one.
Then
So this is the JavaScript.
at the first the yellow star there is like
This one here,
yeah, yellow star.
this is the code that we brought in with our script tag. And now we've given it a name called styled.
So that's why that's the style library.
Yes. Yes, exactly.
So if we want to change the text size and everything, can we put it inside that?
Yeah,
We don't
totally.
need to create a new one for.
No, that's the beauty of it. We can now use this as many times as we want, wherever we want.
So I'll add the size, the font weight, the font I'm using.
Yeah, go for it. Give it a couple more styles in there. See, give it a try. Oh, can you put it in the...
Tim, you have to create a variable or a constant for every single change.
No, no. As we go, you'll see. Yeah,
So just target the H1 and you can put whatever attributes you want inside there.
that's right. So what we've said is, you know, we're creating a custom H1 here, and we're going to put this style on it. Anytime we want these styles, we will now use this styled H component. Yeah. Now, this is just the tip of the iceberg here, because I'm going to show you how anything that you could have done with Sass, you can now do inside of here without any of that pre-compiling stuff that you had to do for Sass. It's beautiful. We've got our first debug, I think. Oh, a grave accent. Ah, I like that. It sounds pretty metal, you know? It sounds like a heavy metal accent.
Neda is good.
Is it the same?
Neda June is good, so you can go to the second one.
Okay, so let's see. Here, Nari? Oh, all good? Okay. Then let's go to WinLib. Whoa, this takes me back. We haven't debugged together in a while. Let's do this thing. Ooh, look at all this stuff going on. This is cool. Oh, okay. So what seems to be the problem there, Winlim? Oh, this one on here? Okay, let's see here. Ah, because you wanted to switch the color to blue, right? Let's see. Oh, I know what it is. You must always start a React component with a capital letter. I feel bad. I should have mentioned that like right from the beginning. So because you've got a lowercase m here, it will not recognize it. We have to make this a capital M. I think that's probably it. Not yet. This one here? Are these the same? Down here?
No, the second constant, and then next after equal mark, the style it should be changed to my style because the first one is.
Oh, yeah, look at that. So I will actually change it up here. Just so we're all using the same. Hey! There we go. So it's two things. This right here, styled, needs to match this const right here. And then your component has to start with a capital M. The reason why, every React component must start with a capital letter so it can tell the difference between a component and a regular HTML element. Because regular HTML elements never start with a capital letter. Behind the scenes, that's how it knows the difference. Because otherwise, they look the same, right? This looks like a piece of HTML to me. So the React compiler knows the difference by the capital. I'm sorry I didn't mention that. That's a slip. It's a good thing I'm good looking. Well, that was funny, right? Come on. Jeez, tough crowd.
We can make columns and everything inside the
We can. We're going to do it. Yes. So do you guys remember the good old Flexbox?
Oh boy. Yeah.
You had some practice now with the Flexbox. We covered it a little bit in the semester one, but I would say the more familiar you get with Flexbox, the better off you're going to be. So let's do a little work here. I'm going to show you a few more features of this styled components library that are going to be really handy for you. So, but as I want you to start working on your little toolkit here of layout and styling options. So to me, oh yeah, question? Debug, yeah, let's take a look.
Percentages as well, right?
It does, yeah. Everything from CSS is in there. Oh. Unexpected end of input. So let's see if we can find that. Oh, I see it. Right here, Molly, on your tester component. See how you've got an opening curly brace, but I don't see a closing one. So let's put a closing one in there. Ah, good. The warning went away. I think I'll get rid of this little comment here. And hey! Let's see. Let's see. Oh, right here, this one is lowercase. Your very first const, where you said const styled, for that one, you want lowercase. Because this one's not a component. It's just a piece of JavaScript. You really only had two problems there. This one should be lowercase. And then you're missing a closing brace down here. Yep, question.
So we are, if I want to grab the H3 from HTML that says layout and styling, can I style it in JavaScript? I just have to give it an ID and select it on JavaScript and use this styling.
Say that again?
Because we have, for example, the H3 here. So I want to style it. So should I give it a class or an ID or something, and then I would select it?
Actually, what you would do is create a new component. So you'd say const, you know what, here, send me the pen, let's do it, so people can get the idea here. So we've got a question. Let's take a look at it together. Whoa, Nita's back?
I'm everywhere.
Oh, that's lab 1. I'm sending in lab 2.
Where am I? Oh, I'm in the wrong lab, sorry. Okay, here we go. Oh, and Mike's in there? Okay, let's take a quick look at Mike's first. And then we've got not a bug, but more like a question. Let's see here. So it looks like we want to see this Game of Thrones showing up here. I like the fact that, you know, it's a small thing, but this makes my job enjoyable when people are like taking what they're learning and trying to do something interesting with it, like something useful. Even though we're just doing an H1, you can still do something relevant, right? So this is great. Let's see what we got. So we've got the styled right here. Now we do have styled H, and it does look like this is the right kind of character here. That all looks pretty good. Let's check the renderer. Is it rendering the tester? It is. Okay, so oh, yes, capital S. That's probably it, right? Oh, that's it. So close, dude. That's it. Very good. Okay, let's take a look at the next one here, which is more like a question. Let's see if we can figure this out here. Okay, so this is all working. That's great. So you were mentioning you want to do something with the H3, right? Okay. So let's refactor this together a little bit, guys. So follow along with me here, because this is kind of important. This is more a question about the approach to making a React application. I've mentioned that in most React applications, you're really not going to have anything except a single div in here. So let's say we want to style up this H3. What we really have to do, first of all, is move this H3 and even this paragraph tag over into the JavaScript. So let's do that first. So I'm going to actually cut from here. I'll go over in here, and I'll paste it. Boom, in here. Now it is going to, just for a second here, give me an error. Here's why. Any component, yes, it's upset. Any component that you make has to have one single element as a root. So we can easily fix this just by putting it in a div right here. So now the whole thing is a component. See what I mean? So now we've got this H3. I'm like, well, it doesn't look right to me. So let me go up here and I'll say const styled H3, right? Equals styled H3. The little accent grave. We'll put that in there. And I'll say, I'm sure you got your own ideas on styles, right? So then instead of using a regular old, yes.
Okay, so sorry.
No,
right? I'm gonna do it on JavaScript.
Yes. That is correct.
Okay, that's it. I
Sort
gotta
of.
add a little time to get it.
With a couple of exceptions. I'm going to show you guys a couple of things I still prefer to do in the sheet.
So Tim, is this like a global variable or other one? Is it only going to target H3s inside that return? Or all H3s that you put inside the JavaScript?
That styled H3 will allow you be able to use in any component. Any React component can make use of this now. But if you were just to write like a styled H3 in your HTML over here, it wouldn't work.
So it is like a global variable?
Not really, no, because components are all encapsulated, right? Now that we've written this, nobody can reach into that and say, oh, I'm going to change that. It was red? No, I'm going to make it blue, kind of thing. This is set in stone here now, which means that it is no longer globally accessible. So that's a good thing. That's what we want.
So if you put any other H3 then in JavaScript though, it'll appear red because of that?
Actually, no. Let's try it. Let's try it. Let's put a regular old H3 in here and see the difference.
What if I do that message to crashes?
Know what I mean? That's the difference. Because this one, this is a component now, but this is an element. Notice how it's got a lowercase h, which means it's not a component, it's a regular HTML element. So you can still use regular HTML wherever you want, but you now have the ability to selectively create your own styled things and drop them in there. And it's all inside JavaScript. You don't have to send anybody a CSS sheet, right? So, because like one of the big goals with React is you can make these components, make these pieces, and then use them as many times as you want in your projects. Maybe it's not just this project you need this for. You want, yeah, that's great. You want to use it for like half a dozen different projects, right? Now you can, and you don't have to worry about your JavaScript getting separated from that CSS sheet. Because there is no CSS sheet. It's all inside the JavaScript.
And I can call it whatever I want, so I can call it.
Yep. That's right. So you can like call it what makes sense to you. You know? Yeah, shoot.
So what if, because it's all inside of tester, right?
Yeah.
Can I separate them, or I don't need to?
Oh, you can. You definitely can. Like, let's say, let's do it. Let's do it. Here, let's refactor this a little further, because the question was, you know, what if I don't want this all to be inside tester? Can I have more than one component? So let's refactor this a little bit, and let's make it make sense a little more here. So instead of just calling it tester, I'm going to a thing here. So I'm going to change it from tester to maybe like user greeting right here. And I'll update the DOM renderer. Okay, so it's back, right? But in my greeting here, let's say I want to have like, let's see, I want to break this up a little bit so that I've got a section that shows you the greeting and then a little piece that says it's been 10 days since you logged in or something like that. So here's how I could do it. Let's bust it up and have two different components here. So this one's going to be the greeting. And I'll put a little note for myself here. Yep. Oh, I'm not in professor mode. Sorry. Yeah, sorry. Is that okay? Can I just keep working in this for this little piece here, or?
If you're nice to us, no.
I mean,
Yeah, go ahead.
You can fork it later and everyone can copy it.
because like I can fork this and go into professor mode, but then I got to get you guys the link somehow. You know what I mean?
Bless you.
Oh, you know what? I will do it. Here. Let me fork it right here. So what I'm doing is I'm working along in Carolyn's example a little bit here. So let me go into professor mode for that. And I will share this to you in the chat window.
Is that on assignment?
So you guys can see that in the chat. I've just kind of gone rogue here a little bit. I'm branching off to work on Carolyn's question here a little bit, because I think what she's wanting to do is pretty much what you guys are all going to want to do here. So follow me here. Let's do a little more work in here. So let me sketch it for a second. Here's what I have in mind. I'm making this user greeting. And here's what I'm thinking. I want to have a little area up here that is the greeting itself. And then I'm going to have a second little thing that says, like, it's been like 10 days since you logged in, right? So what we do, we actually end up making 3 components. We make one component for this little area. We make another component for this little area. And then we put those 2 inside a third component that is like the holder, or what I'm calling user greeting here. That's the idea. So let's give that a try. So I'm going to make my first little one here, which I'm calling greeting. I'll make another little one, which I'm calling days since login. I'm gonna go a little faster here because, like, you aren't necessarily doing this. I just want to show you this, right? And then I'll go back to my professor mode session and we'll go piece by piece. So let's flesh this out. So usually what I would do initially is just make a little plain old HTML version of this. Yeah. So this one up here I'll make like an H1. And I'll say, welcome human.
Welcome, Earthling.
That'll work. And then down here, maybe I'll do just a paragraph and I'll say, it has been 10 days since
We met.
paragraph just like that. Okay. I think that's pretty good. Okay, so now I've got my little user greeting, and it's composed of 2 other components here, which is useful because maybe I want to use this elsewhere, right? Like maybe if the person's submitting a story or something like that, I want to reuse this component there. But if I want to style this, I've got a couple of different options. So Caroline has already made some styles. Why don't I use them? So she's got up here this styled H. So instead of using this H1, I'll just change that to a styled H right here. Boom. There we go. That's looking pretty good. And then we've got another one, which is like the styled H3. Maybe I use that down here. You know? So it's starting to take shape, basically. It's pretty nicely organized. And so the main component here, this user grading, it doesn't really do too much. It counts on its children to do most of what's happening here. But that said, there's no reason why you couldn't drop more things in here. Like, there's nothing stopping me from using your styled H here as well. That's the beauty of components, right? You can nest them, you can move them around.
Now, if I wanted to target a div, would I use style.div when I'm making the
Yes,
concept?
yes, exactly.
And then you just write the styles for that.
Yep. It is that simple. No selectors. Notice, I haven't written a single selector in here. No worrying about any of that stuff. You just make your style, and it's a component that you use wherever you want. It's pretty nice.
So H1 will do for everything in H1, P will do everything for P, basically. Paragraph.
Nope. Nope, because when you make it, you're giving it a component name.
I see.
So only when you use that component by its name will that style get applied.
I see.
Yeah. Now that said, guys, here's a couple of things that I think should go in a style sheet that I'll show you. Do you guys remember way back when I talked with you guys about CSS resets? Remember that stuff? Well, in fairness, it was 2 years ago. Can you believe that? I cannot believe it. It's like I just met you guys. You know what I mean? It's flying by. So here's what I'm talking about. In the style sheet, if you put a little universal selector like this, the snowflake or star, here's a couple things I'd recommend. Number one, you're going to say box sizing set to border box. Does anybody remember that one? This one's pretty crucial. This guy named Paul Irish, a really well-known writer, discovered this property, and he wrote an article about how it just magically fixes a lot of problems. And here's what it comes down to. With margin and padding, when you give them a value, there's two ways that it can go. So here's Timmer, right? Here's a couple of desks. And I'm saying, I want, 2 feet of spacing in between Tim and this desk. There's two ways we can do this. We can take those desks and push them apart until we have our 2 feet of spacing. Or we can make Tim skinnier, right? Either one can happen to make that condition true. It's actually the same in CSS with margin and padding. So when you say, set this margin value, well, depending on the conditions, the browser may either squish in or push out. And you don't really know which is going to happen usually. It's one of the big things that throws people off. It's kind of a cascading problem because let's say you expected it to squish in and it pushed out, and suddenly maybe you had a grid of things and suddenly there's no room for this one and it drops down, which then pushes everything else below down, which causes another problem, and your whole page is going nuts, right? So there's a combination we can use that solves most of those problems. When you set box sizing border box, this has to do with the padding. It tells the browser, anywhere you have padding, squish inwards. So it's never going to squish out or spread out. So it makes it a lot more predictable when we're doing our layout stuff. The other thing that people will usually do with something like this is this one, kill all margin. Kill, destroy. Get rid of all margins. And so what this does, there's nothing like box sizing border box for margins. That only works with padding. So with margins, we say, just get rid of them. If I want a margin, I'll put it in. Don't let the browser just put in the margins where it wants, because that can really screw up our layouts. So this is like my #1 tip for working with CSS, is always drop those 2 things in there. It's going to make your life much more bearable.
Then we go to our styled H and put a margin, whatever we like.
Exactly, exactly.
But how do you ensure that everything gets rendered? Like, if you go to the bottom of JF, when you're rendering it, how you make sure everything gets rendered, all the variables?
Oh, you know why? Because ultimately, they're all in user greeting. So we only have to render this one because these are all children of this one.
So you still have, so you have to put it inside there.
Yes. Yes. Now, I'll pass along like a couple more small little things that you should probably do with your CSS sheet. Question? Yep. Yeah, definitely. Let's take a look. Oh, is it in the chat window? Whoa, am I behind here? Okay. Okay, let's start from here. Oh, good. I'm glad the stream is working. Thank goodness. Okay, let's go to Molly. Whoop. Let's see what we got. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so here's our styled H. And here's styled H. So this one, it looks like it's working, right? Because that's the right color. Great. And, oh, I see. You're doing some cool stuff here. Okay, I think I know what's up. You need to change your renderer, because it's still rendering tester. But the one you want to render is this nice new one you made called content. You can. There's 2 different ways you can do it, so let me show you both of them. The first one would be this. We just go here, and we change that to content, right here. Now here's what you can do, Molly. In your return, in your return, if you want, here, let's do this, just so it's a little more visible. Inside of here, now you could put tester, right? And there it is. Yeah. That would be my recommended way. The other way that you could do it, and in some of my labs, you'll see some of my examples that I've done it this way. There's nothing stopping you from using render DOM more than once. So if you wanted to, you could go over here and put another div. I'll just call it example right here. Right? So now we've got 2 divs in here. And what I could do over here, I could take this out of here. And I could put React DOM twice in here. But this time, I'll look for, yeah. You see how that works? So you've got 2 options, but personally, myself, I would use the first one, usually. Because technically, what we have here now is 2 React applications that are running at the same time in one page. And usually, you want to have just one. Yeah, definitely. So what we're learning right now is composition. It's putting components inside other components. So you know how you can put a div inside a div? It's a very similar idea. except now they're React components, and we're doing it in JavaScript with all the advantages that that gives us. So in this scenario, if I'm planning out a little greeting for the user, what I probably want to do is take the first part of it here, the greeting, and make that a component. It's going to be really simple. All it does is just give me a little h1, and maybe I want to put some styles on it. Very, very simple. All of our components should be like that. Very little, not too many lines of code. Then I'll want a second one that says how many days it's been since login. Now, why would I do that? Well, let's say I have another part of my site, and maybe it's the purchase area. And let's say you get points every day that you log in. And you need 500 points to buy a new sweater. I don't know. Something nice, right? So here's my new sweater. Wait. I'm going to make it a turtleneck so I look cool. There we go. So here's my new sweater. And you need 500 points. And this person hasn't logged in enough to get the 500 points. Well, maybe we want to now take this component and put it in here to say it's been 10 days since you logged in. We can now reuse that component, right? We don't have to make this code all over again because there it is ready for us to use. And maybe there's 5, 10 different places on our site that we want to make use of that. That's the way that React works. Is always by creating these small little pieces as components and then composing them together to create what we want.
And then probably what you do further on in JavaScript is target the component itself when you're looking for results. So if you're looking for the number 10 in days, then you target the component to look for like 10 days, and then have a function, I guess, send the information to the other one. Is that how it kind of will work? Meaning, I'm not sure you get what I'm saying, but like
I do.
The components as opposed to one big, all the information in one thing. And like you're saying,
so
one thing breaks down, it won't affect everything else. So.
It's jumping ahead a little bit, but here's how that would work, because that's a really good question. There's a very recognizable pattern in React, which is called containers. I think if you go to, if you look at my lab 4, it's talking about containers, and there's some examples. But just jumping ahead a little bit, here's how it would work. You would wind up having what we've called a smart component. And that component has a memory where it can store data. So then any of our stateless function components that need to show some of that data go inside of it. And it gives them what they need. Okay, you'll have to use your imagination because this marker's like not working. But it gives them what they need using the props. So in the last lab, remember our last example, we used props? That's why we're learning about that. So what will happen is this smart component up here, the mother of everybody, is going to talk to the database. And his job is just to get the data. Then it takes the information out of that and gives it through the props to the dumb components that just put it on the screen. So that's what we would use to show like it's been 10 days since you logged in.
And the props will be wrapped inside those things before that.
Yeah, the little curly braces. Exactly.
So would those be, what you call it again, stateful? No, just props. Never mind.
Exactly. Exactly. You're right. Yeah.
From these two examples that you showed, like this one and this that you just did, can I choose which one I prefer to use to render? Because I personally prefer this way.
Yeah.
And then I just like apply from wherever I have. Because for me it's kind of like confused to see. this.
Yeah.
And then when I render this, can I just render this, or you want us to render the second one?
Oh, no, 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 no. This is up to you.
Okay.
This is completely up to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Should I leave this here to show that
Nah,
I
get rid of them. Get rid of them. Yeah. No. What I'm hoping to see from you is that, you know, if you get the idea of how to do this, I'd prefer to see your own idea with this.
Yeah.
You know? So maybe, like I did the Transformers thing, but maybe you have some other, you know, concept that you'd like to do. I would love to see it. So let me get through a couple more little things here, guys. Was that was okay, Molly? Okay, good. Let's see. We had a couple more requests. Mike, let's take a look. You're all good? Cool, cool. All right. And then what about Carolyn? All good? Is this Travis? Okay, cool. Oh, Patricia's here. Cool. Oh man, everyone's got it. This is great.
I do have a question for you though. Yeah. Could you just go back over the section with my component, sorry, class, my component extends React components. What is that for you?
Oh, that's a smart component. We're not using that yet. It'll be 1 or 2 more labs before we get to that guy. Just to show you that class is a reserved word. So you can't use class in your JSX. Yeah, but we don't need it right now. It is going to be handy in the future, definitely.
Actually, because I have put this welcome here, right? But it's not rendering, and I did put it in the first component.
Shoot me the pen. Let's bring it up. Emmett's got something interesting going on. Let's take a look. Mr. Dipsauce, one of our regulars on the show. Okay, so he was mentioning that he's not seeing one of the components that he's created. The welcome? Let me do a quick search for that. This one right here. So, okay, so the welcome is in a component called greeting. So let's see where greeting's being used. If I go Control F, I can search for greeting. Ah.
There's nothing there.
Okay, so I think the reason we're not seeing it is because it isn't included in the part that's being rendered, right? So we're rendering first component. So if we want to see our greeting, it's going to have to be somehow inside of first component, right here. So let's go in here and drop our greeting in. There you go.
But why it has to be at the top? I was trying that in the bottom.
Oh, then let's put it on the bottom.
Okay, that was weird.
Boop, boop.
I tried that though. So weird.
Really?
Yeah.
Well,
Maybe it's one of those things.
when you're a good person like me, things work out.
Okay, gotcha.
I don't know, try clean living. It's probably just a little typo, dude.
Yes.
But you had the right idea. So are you starting to warm up to how these components work? How you can put components inside components? It's pretty cool, right? So, so let me show you a couple other little features here. There's a couple of things I'm going to insist on just a little bit for you guys. Because I know everybody has their own ideas in terms of design and so forth. I've mentioned material design a few times now. And I can tell you that if you put a little time and effort into like being a little strict about following the material design guidelines, you'll greatly advance your design sense. Okay? The material design guidelines are extremely well done. Google wasn't messing around when they made them. Now, I'm not saying you got to use material design forever, but I would like to see you take a stab at following those design guidelines, because you will learn so much by doing it. So to start with, let's think about colors. Okay? Palettes, color palettes. There's a ton of recommendations about color palettes in the material design guidelines. But you can break it down to that you generally have one primary color and one complementary color. So you know how we try to avoid using too many fonts in a design? Have you noticed that? If you got a bunch of different fonts, it starts looking really busy and kind of distracting to people. This is something we've discovered through actual user testing over time. Experts map this stuff. They actually have devices where they watch where people's eyes are looking. And if the design is too busy, people lose focus. So the general recommendation is use one font, maybe two fonts, and then just try a couple of different weights for those fonts and a couple of different sizes for those fonts, but don't change the fonts all over the place. So, that's built into the material design guidelines. But they take a similar tactic when it comes to color. They do a lot of discussion about how color means something in your design. And the same way that you don't want to have tons of different fonts, you probably don't want to have tons of different colors either in the actual UI. In the content, go nuts. As many colors as you want. But in the UI itself, you probably want to limit the colors a little bit. So let me bring you to a tool that you can use. And I would say this is probably like the first place you want to go when you're creating your design for this lab 2 here. So let me jump over into it.
How long do we have to make this lab 2 the best? Tonight or next week?
It's always the same. In 2 days, we'll do our first check-in to take a look in it, give you some feedback, and then you have until the day before to work on it. Like the day before, we'll give you the final. Okay, so let's go to design.google.com. We're going to jump into one of the tools here. I believe it's in Resources, Color Tool. Now this is a pretty comprehensive tool here. This allows you to make some color selections, get everything you need to create like a material design. And one of the things it does, which is so important for you, it checks the accessibility of your text. Do you know what I mean when I'm talking about the accessibility of your text?
If it's accessible for like people with low copyright,
yeah, some kind of visual impairment. Like most people are not totally blind, but there are a lot of people who have a visual impairment of some kind.
Or you have to give it enough contrast. So
Exactly. Exactly. There's actual standards for the level of contrast that you need. And those standards are rated up to a AAA. So, for instance, like I've done work with the Canadian National Institute for the Blind. Everything's got to be AAA standard for visibility. And like a lot of places that you would work for are going to have some standard for accessibility that you got to meet. So you don't really get to just pick whatever you think looks good, unfortunately. In the UI, we're strictly talking about the user interface here. In the content, that's a different story. You can do what you want, but the system that people use for actually interacting with this thing, there is going to have to be some standards applied. So let me share with you a quick link here. Let me go to an example from the Transformers stuff. And I really want you guys to look into these examples here. So here's my little example of a page done up I guess, to promote the transformers.
So we need to build this kind, like this example is our design or our animation?
Well, this is to help you. This is using the styled components.
Yeah, but if you
So
just the page with beautiful layout.
yes, I'll say yes. I mean, I'm not being militant on this. I want to see what you can do. But what I am being a little, pushing you on a little bit here is like, put some effort into actually trying to apply the material design standards here. Because a lot of places are using it. And most people, when you get right down to it, do not know what it is. Like, for instance, if I say to someone, what's the baseline size for a font? In pixels, what's the baseline size for a font? Well, like all what you're saying, but the answer is pretty simple. It's 16. 16 points is the baseline size for a font, right?
For web, 16, because for responsive design is the best.
Well, it's a little more complex than that. This is kind of what I'm getting to, right? Because when you look in the design docs for material, you're going to see, they specify point sizes for fonts. So if the baseline is 16 and they say like 45, then you need to like take that 45 divided by 16, and that's going to give you the size of font that you need. So I have a bunch of examples of that inside of here. Let's just look at a couple of things, because this is what I want you to do. I guarantee you, if you put some solid effort into trying to hit their guidelines, you will improve your design 1,000%. Everyone who I know who has done this has improved their design. Now in time, you're probably going to vary from it and go and do your own thing a little bit. You'll tweak it and mess with it a bit. But it's kind of one of those cases where you need to know the rules before you break them. I know that's a cliche. You've probably heard it from like 1,000,000 times from Aviva, but it's very true. So here's kind of how this thing evolved. So first off, I want to know rules for typography. I also want to know rules for colors. So I've put the actual link in here of where I used the color tool.
So we just have to grab the link from that color tool link.
Mm-hmm. Yep. This will give you an idea, and then you can go ahead with, making your own palette. Well, am I offline again? Whew, there we go. So this is my theme, right? This is my bumblebee theme, basically. So there's a couple of things to take a note of in here. Here's my primary color, and it's telling me never use white text on it. Not legible. No level of white text is acceptable on this. There's actual math behind this. It is applying a formula to determine the contrast, and it's telling me that people who have a vision problem aren't going to see this. To me, it looks okay. I think it's all right. I might have used it, but it totally would have broke accessibility. That's a big no-no in design terms. But it's telling me I can use black text, but it must be a minimum of 45% opacity, right? If the text is large. If the text is smaller, it's got to be a minimum of 59% opacity. Would you have come up with that on your own? No, nobody would, right? Like, you got to hand it to Google, at least when it comes to data. It's surprising, but they've managed to turn data into good design. Strange.
Can you go over how did you get there from your code to see all that information?
I just copied and pasted this link that I've got here. So in the Bumblebee example, the 2-column, here's a link where it says color tool.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you copy that and just paste it into the browser, it's going to fill in the colors. But if you just come to the color tool on your own, you can definitely make your own palette here. So maybe, I don't know, today I'm thinking not Bumblebee, I'm thinking more like Aquaman. So I don't know, pick out a blue, and it's going to start filling in some suggestions for me here. Like, if this is going to be your primary, then here's what here's what a menu bar is roughly going to look like. Here's what the status area is going to look like. We've got an example of the FAB, the floating action button down here. Even this language that I'm talking here, when we talk about list items, cards, chips, tiles, drawers, menu bars, status bars, all of that language, you're going to want to know that because it's kind of jumped outside of just material design now. It's becoming like normal design language, even if you're not following material design. But it's definitely a big part of material design here. So what I'm saying is like, let's not just, you know, do things because we think they look pretty. Because that's kind of like, you know, writing stories that are only about you. You know what I mean? Like, that's okay, but if you step outside of that and you try and apply someone else's standard to this thing, you'll learn a lot more about design. We've got a great opportunity. And the styled components library works very, very nicely with this. So going back to the example here, you start to see some of the other features that you can make use of in styled components, including variables. So see how I've made a variable called primary color? And I've actually copied and pasted the hex codes. Here, let me just go back to my Bumblebee theme for a second here. Here we go. So see down here in the primary area, there's my hex code for my primary color. So what I've done is grab that hex code and put it right here in this variable called primary color. Then inside of here, I've given it another property, text color, which I'm setting to black. Why? Because I want to enforce that we never use white text there. Because the standards have told me white text is an accessibility problem. See what we're going with this? And then a couple other properties that I've set here. I've made a variable called the alpha minimum, which I'm setting to 59%. Why? Anyone can tell me? Yeah, Harendra's got it. If we go back here, 59% minimum, right? So what I'm doing is I'm enforcing these design standards by putting it in the component. Bear with me. Let's see how this works. So I've taken all that information and I've put it all together in this one object called primary color. Now let's look how that's being used. Yeah, it's an object. It's an object with everything I need in one place. So here's my menu bar, which is a styled section. Same as we've just done now with our H1s and so forth. But in the background, I can now enforce the right color here as a variable. It is Sass, but it's not, because it's not in the CSS box, is it? Here's what's happened. We now have Sass built in. No need for compiling. No need for installing tools. Isn't that sick? That's great, right? It's so good. So what I'm saying is if we've got that ability, that's like we got a big cannon here. Let's not shoot golf balls out of it. You know what I'm saying? So combine this good stuff we're getting here with some solid design practice. Now what I'm saying, I'm not you know, I get nervous about like enforcing design decisions on people because I know that's kind of a personal thing. People have their own ideas about what is good design and so forth. But what I am suggesting is let's try out being a little strict about following a design guideline, because the reality is that you're probably going to have to do that at some point. You know? Even if you become a creative director somewhere and you know, you're making the tiles and style guides and things like that, somebody's going to take that and translate it into a strict style guide so that the product looks uniform and, you know, represents the company. So step one, I do want you to use that color tool. Look at all the information it gives you.
And where is the color class? Because the primary color, that color,
Yep.
and the column means the class, right? In the HTML.
So the primary color object is right up top here. So that's this one right here.
I mean the color.
Oh, color? Let's see. I'm using that right. Oh, actually, I didn't have to use color in this case because I was just setting the background. But then the things inside the menu bar, I'm using the color on. Yeah.
I mean, this color. So
Yes.
It's a class, right?
It's
Class
not a class.
But the space is a class, right? I saw the space class tag in the HTML tag.
Well, this one is not a class actually. What it's doing, it's looking in the primary color object for the variable called color.
Variable color.
Yeah, so look at primary object up here.
Yeah.
Right up here.
I
So there's color.
Primary that color.
Yeah,
I see.
yeah.
Okay.
So what I'm doing is I'm saying anytime you are using my primary color, this must be the color. The text should always be this, and the opacity must be at least 59, and the maximum is 100% alpha. Yeah.
Then the space is perhaps space, perhaps that space, just outside of the color. Yeah, I mean the perhaps space is it's a HTML tag. This one is.
Let me talk about that.
Okay.
Now that I've got it up on the screen, because probably some more people have questions on that. Okay, guys, one more example here. So not only do you get a lot of the features of Sass inside of here, like variables and nested styles and so forth, and I will show you more about those things, but I think you will also learn a lot just looking at these examples. But one of the things I want to point out, we had a question about what's going on here with this little thing in here. What we're looking at, you've got the idea, I can tell already. Yes. Well, we have this little expression here is what we call a ternary operator. It's a way of doing a little if-else type of statement without writing any ifs. Inside of expressions here, they don't really let you use if statements. So instead, we use this thing called the ternary operator. Here's how it works. We look at this and we say, okay, give me the props. Now, if there's a space property in the props, then use it. Else, use 0. Exactly. So the result is we're saying for the padding, if you got a props called space, whatever value it was, use that in the padding. Otherwise, use this default of 0. So let me show you where we're using that. I'll look for a column. Give me 1 second. There's a good example. See this column? And I've said space equals 1 EM. So going back up to the style there, right here, well, there is a prop called space on that component. And its value was 1 EM. That's what we set it to. So this style is able to say the padding should be 1 EM. That's a little bit to wrap your head around, because we've never been able to do like logic inside CSS. We've never had conditions inside CSS. So that's going to take a little bit of doing there. I feel like we're probably going to need to work on this over time a little bit. Like, as I've mentioned, if you look at the examples, our conversation will probably make a little more sense. Because if you just kind of dig through it for a while, you'll see how this stuff works. But I think probably over the next few classes, we could tackle 1 or 2 of these features at a time. If we try and do them all at once, I mean, I can do it, but it might be a bit overwhelming. So what I'm suggesting is, for now, get started by get familiar with that color tool, get familiar with the standards. So maybe you can make one of those objects where you're able to take those standards and put them in the object. Like, what should the color be? What should the minimum size be? What should the opacity be? Et cetera, et cetera.
Is there a way to determine what font will suit different colors?
I don't think they have a rule for fonts per color. I don't think. But what would happen is, like, let's say it's a very thin font, then it might go into the contrast calculation, because a very thin font might require more contrast to show up. But this is more to do with an opacity rule or a color rule than a font rule. They don't put too many rules on what font you should use. They do, like everybody, they recommend the sans serif fonts. But you're pretty open for using fonts as you wish. Where they do put a lot of specifications on are the font sizes. They definitely have a lot of recommendations on what size things should be when they're used in headings and paragraphs and that kind of thing.
So Tim, just to be clear, are we designing a landing page pretty much? Or not really?
I feel like a landing page is going to be a bit much right now for you guys. In yesterday's lab, you had an opportunity to make like a greeting, a user greeting or something like that. And in the examples, you saw there's like an example of my little, join the Transformers or Decepticons, and it's very small. And there's Devin's like, welcome to Socialite. It's been this long. Now, if you dig in Devin's, as a bonus, she's made a component for responsive video.
So do you want props to this one or not really?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Props?
You definitely should be using some props, yes. Yeah.
Can you scroll down to where you specified your space?
Yeah. So that was on my column. Right there.
I don't mean to be bugging in. don't want to be disrespectful. But yesterday, well, we have a class at 4:15, and like Sumit was kind of like killing us because you had us right up to the time. Is it possible to get like 5 minutes before to grab coffee and stuff or no?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. We were actually done about 10 minutes early yesterday, but everybody's asking questions.
Yeah,
so
yeah, no,
yeah.
Really, so yeah, just, yeah, okay.
Yeah, I mean, I've pretty much showed what I want to right now.
Yeah.
The rest is going to be looking in the examples a little bit.
Okay.
So let me just sum it up here.
No problem.
Okay, guys. So here's our mission. Just to spell it out a little carefully here. So tomorrow we'll give you your first round of review for yesterday's stuff. So what could you do that would be cool for yesterday's stuff? Well, I made my little example that was like, hey, Bob, you've got $50 in your account. Poor Bob. You know, I've done that a million times. So what I don't want to see from your example is, Bob, you've got $50 in your account. You know what I'm saying? Like, there should be some kind of originality in that. Now, the originality is one thing, but the technical side of it, well, what did we do in our third example? We made use of some props, right? That's how it showed that Bob had $50. So I definitely want to see you using some props in that, okay? Now, we also did show how to apply some styles the normal way, just using class name. So if you drop a few styles on there to make it look nice, like that's going to be really good, right? So taking that and thinking about what we did today, if you had done styles on that first example, could you take those and redo them using the styled components library and move that stuff over into the JavaScript and make it work? That would be like pretty nice to see. Question?
I'm still getting the props because yesterday we used the props by parameter insert the component. So you said prop is a requirement calling name in React JavaScript. So is it the top or some calling something from the others, or actually I don't know.
Can you show me what you mean?
I don't know what the prop work. What are you doing?
Okay, so in your example here, you have props.name, right? That's very good, because down here, you had to give your name here. But you can give as many props as you want. So what if you had one that's first name and another one that's last name? And then you show first name and last name. This would show that you're starting to know how to use props.
So then I can bring the many name or last name, some stuff in the third component, because I use the props in the third component.
That's right. That's right. See how these ones don't have props.
Yes.
So you couldn't really do that with them.
Then in in here, oh no, not here.
I like your questions.
And here's the prop as well.
Exactly.
Is it function name is props?
No.
I didn't see that.
Actually, let me show you, because there's actually two ways you can do this. If you want to be a little more clear, you can put the round brackets around this.
That
Like
one
that.
is a parameter as well.
Yeah.
Then, actually, go back to the prop space. So this one is the parameter as well.
Yes.
Parameter. So then it's just the function and props, and then it's the
Yeah. You got the idea? Yeah.
properties.
Yep.
Equal the clone and then the value.
So this is saying, look in the props.
Yes.
If there's props.space, so if there's a space property, use its value. But if there isn't, use a 0. Yeah. So this one here looks at it and sees, is there a value?
That's a value?
Yeah.
Oh.
If there is, use the value. Otherwise, use a 0.
Then we
Yeah.
put that the space is 1 EM.
Exactly.
Then either we change the 0.
Yeah. Yeah,
Oh,
exactly,
either we
exactly.
change the
You got the
0.
idea. So right here, if we go down to our columns,
Yeah.
so where is it? In here I had a column.
Here space
Exactly,
is, 1
yeah.
EM. Either we change the
Exactly. But if I remove this,
Yes.
it's going to become a 0 because there's no value now. Yeah. See how that works?
Anyway, the column space is a 0 because we put the prop space, right?
Yes.
Okay.
You got the idea. Yeah, yeah. Might take a little
I
practice,
almost
but
agree.
you've got it. Yeah.
Yeah, our practice.
Yeah, good job. Yeah, yeah. I like your questions.
Because you said that, like, for example, today's class we post today, and then we have 2 days to work on it, and by Friday you guys will be looking at it.
Yeah.
By Friday, what time?
It's hard to say. Anytime that day because it depends on what we're working
Yeah,
on.
no, but I'll be very honest with you. Friday is Christopher's class, so we usually have an assignment. He gives us the assignment on Friday to next Friday.
If you want to be safe,
Yeah.
like have it done the day before, you know,
Yeah, but
that's the best
I'll
way.
be very honest with you. I'll probably only be able to take a look on the weekends. Like maybe I'll submit something bad to you, you'll look, and I'll implement it on weekends because I am working too.
So
it's
today's,
hard.
what's today, Wednesday?
Today's Wednesday.
So then we don't even look in it until Friday.
Yes.
So then, yeah, the weekend's fine for that one.
Because I'll probably
So
I'll go
then-
home Friday night and I'll start working on it Friday night. But probably you have seen it.
You know
already,
what? You'll be fine because our final is on Monday for the Tuesday class,
Okay.
and it's on Tuesday for today's class.
Okay.
So the weekend should be.
Okay.
You lucky.
Okay, so just
Yeah.
then
So just a note, it's not my fault if you don't get to your next class on time. Okay? I am taking no responsibility.
No, I'm just like
I'm not shouting at you.
things are working right now because
Yeah.
usually we're having lots of trouble with Unity. Like it's taking lots of like.
Yes.
So
I know
usually- yeah.
exactly what you mean.
Yeah, because like it's code and
Yeah.
Unity.
Yeah,
And then
yeah.
it's being like hard.
Just I will do your assignments. It's just
Yeah.
on the weekend probably.
I do sympathize. That's why I'm teaching an extra course for some of the last group of students right now, because they had a problem where they were not able to concentrate on.
Yeah, and also
So.
these classes for Tuesday and Wednesday is like really bad
Back to
because
back.
we get over like two
Yeah.
assignments.
Yeah. It's tough on me too.
Yeah, no, I know.
No time in between
No, we
to
even try
to.
to ask to Sumit to change the classes to be better for everybody.
Yeah.
He said it is impossible.
Yeah. But just
All right.
letting you know, it's not your fault. it's
We'll do our
fault.
best. Okay. See you guys.
If I wanna search about what you taught today, what should I say?